At the checkout counter, I stepped in to help an elderly woman cover the cost of her groceries. She suddenly leaned in close, gripping my arm with surprising strength, and whispered in a low, urgent voice, "Once your boy leaves the house, do not touch the snow outside. Your life depends on it." I brushed it off as the confused warning of a fragile old woman. But the next morning, when I looked out into my yard, what I saw nearly made my chest seize. That warning hadn't come out of nowhere. It all began 3 days earlier, on a cold December afternoon, when the season's first true blizzard swept through Mapleton. I was standing in line at Harper's Market, a small family-owned grocery just a short walk from my home on Willow Lane, watching thick snowflakes drift lazily against the glass windows. At 70 years old, you stop running across town for bargains. You shop where people recognize you, where the shelves never change and the floors creak the same way they always have. The woman ahead of me was carefully placing coins onto the counter, her hands trembling with every movement. She wore a worn-out coat and a wash-thin scarf that had seen far better winters. On the conveyor belt sat a heartbreaking selection: a small loaf of bread, a carton of milk, 3 potatoes, and 1 lonely onion. "You're about $1.50 short," said Emily, the young cashier, her voice kind but apologetic. The woman froze. "That can't be right," she whispered. "I counted everything twice at home." Someone behind me let out an impatient breath. The line was getting longer. I looked at her hunched shoulders, her cracked red hands, and those meager groceries. It had been 5 years since a leaner passed, yet I could still hear her voice as clearly as ever. "Samuel, we have enough. If you can help, you do." "Put it on my bill," I said, placing a 20 on the counter. "Oh dear, you don't have to do that," the woman said as she turned toward me. That's when our eyes met. They weren't dull or unfocused. They were sharp, clear as a frozen sky, cutting straight through me. Her gaze pierced straight through me, so intense it stole the air from my lungs. There was something ancient behind those eyes, something that carried knowledge it shouldn't have had. "Thank you, dear," she said softly. Her fingers tightened around my sleeve, far stronger than I expected. "Kindness like yours is never lost." She lifted her bags from the counter, then hesitated and turned back. The noise of the store seemed to fade, as if the world itself had paused. She leaned closer, and I caught the scent of mothballs mixed with dried lavender. "Listen to me," she whispered. "When your son leaves tonight, do not touch the snow in your yard. No matter what he says, don't shovel until morning." "I'm sorry, what?" I murmured. Her grip hardened, nails pressing through the fabric. "Your life depends on it, promise me." Something in her voice sent a shiver straight through my bones. "Okay," I said, "I promise." She let go, gave a single nod, and walked toward the doors with a speed that didn't match her fragile appearance. The automatic doors slid open, and she vanished into the blowing snow, swallowed by the white as if she'd never existed at all. My heart thudded violently in my chest. "Mr. Hart, are you all right?" Emily asked from behind the counter. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, forcing a nod. I paid for my groceries, chicken, vegetables, bread, and stepped back out into the storm. The wind slapped my face as I made my way home, boots crunching through fresh powder. Her words replayed over and over in my mind. "When your son leaves tonight." How could she have known Daniel was coming over? I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. He'd called that morning, said he needed to stop by after work. First time in 3 months, without me being the one to ask. I laughed it off as I unlocked the front door and kicked snow from my boots. Just the ramblings of an old woman, I told myself. Probably dementia. People like that latch onto strange ideas, see meaning where none exists. Still, something about her eyes refused to leave me. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the snow fall harder, piling up in smooth, untouched layers. There had been something in her stare, like she'd witnessed things I couldn't begin to imagine, new truths I didn't want to face. It felt as though she'd looked straight into my future and seen something that frightened her. Something involving my son. Something involving the snow, now lying perfectly undisturbed across my yard. That evening, headlights swept across the living room wall. Around 6:30, a dark sedan turned into the driveway, tires crunching through the deepening snow. I opened the door before he had the chance to knock. "Daniel, come inside. You'll freeze out there." "Can't stay long, Dad," he said as he stepped in, brushing snow from his jacket but not bothering to take it off. At 38, my son felt more like a stranger than family. Sharp features, eyes always flicking to his phone, always rushing toward somewhere else. "I've got a work trip," he said, still avoiding my eyes. "I'm leaving in about an hour, just wanted to check on you." "That's thoughtful," I replied, trying not to sound as surprised as I felt. "How long will you be gone?" "A week, maybe 10 days. His eyes drifted around the room, pausing on the framed photos of Alina, then sliding toward the back window that looked out over the yard. Snow was piling up fast. "The roads are already getting bad," he said. "They'll probably plow by morning. Dad, you really should shovel the driveway tonight before it gets worse." "Tonight," I said. "Daniel, it's still coming down hard." "Do it tonight." There was a sharpness in his voice that made me uneasy. "You're not getting any younger. If something happens, emergency services need to be able to reach the house." The concern felt off, too practiced, too forceful. "I'll be fine," I said. "Will you?" He stepped closer. "You'll be here alone, right? No one checking in on you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Millers are in Florida, aren't they?" My stomach tightened. "How do you know that?" "I called them last week," he said quickly. "Just making sure someone was keeping an eye on you." A chill slid down my spine. "When your son leaves tonight, do not touch the snow in your yard." "I can take care of myself," I said slowly. "Just shovel the driveway, Dad, please, before you go to bed." He glanced at his phone and frowned. "I really have to go. My flight's early." "Flight," I repeated. "I thought this was a work trip by car." There was the briefest pause. "I'm driving to Riverton tonight, flying out from there." He moved toward the door and I followed. "Daniel," I said, lowering my voice, "is everything okay?" "Yeah, just work stress." He stopped at the doorway. For a split second, something flashed across his face, something raw. "Fear." "Promise me you'll shovel tonight," he said. The old woman's warning rang in my head like a siren. "I'll think about it." "Drive safe," I said quietly. He stared at me, jaw clenched, then turned and walked out into the storm. I watched his taillights fade into the white curtain of falling snow until they vanished completely. I locked the door, then I checked it again. Standing alone in the dim hallway, I listened to the house creak and settle around me. Daniel's visit hadn't brought comfort. It had left me with the unmistakable feeling that something was deeply, terribly wrong. The pressure about the driveway hadn't sat right with me. The way he kept asking who would be checking in on me felt even worse. I walked over to the back window and stared out at the yard. The snow lay untouched, smooth, clean, almost perfect. Not a single mark disturbed it. My shovel rested against the garage wall, right where I'd left it, easy to grab. The old woman's warning echoed in my head, tangled together with Daniel's strange behavior, his probing questions, the tension in his voice, that desperate edge I couldn't shake. I left the shovel exactly where it was. That night I locked every door and went to bed, but sleep refused to come. I lay awake in the darkness, listening to the wind scream and the snow batter the windows, trying to make sense of what was happening. Her words kept looping through my thoughts, relentless as the storm itself. "Your life depends on it." I woke at dawn to complete silence, the kind that only comes after a blizzard, when the world seems to hold its breath beneath a heavy blanket of white. The storm had ended sometime during the night, leaving everything still and muted. My back ached as I shuffled downstairs to the kitchen. I filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and wandered to the window while I waited for it to boil. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Deep, clearly defined tracks cut through the flawless snow in my backyard. They weren't mine. I hadn't stepped outside since the previous afternoon. They weren't the mail carriers either. These came from the side gate, not the front path. My hand froze on the curtain. The tracks led straight from the gate toward the house, moving with purpose. They circled the entire ground floor, stopping at every window, the living room, the kitchen where I now stood, then around to the back, beneath my bedroom window. My pulse slammed in my ears as I moved closer to the glass. The footprints came right up to the window, close enough that whoever made them could have looked inside, close enough to see me sleeping. And then I noticed the marks beneath the frame. Scuffed patches in the snow, like someone had tested the window, tried it, checked whether it was locked. The footprints themselves were enormous, size 13, maybe larger. Deep impressions pressed hard into the snow, the kind left by a heavy man, someone solid, someone strong. Someone who had been right outside my home while I slept. The stride was long, steady, intentional. Whoever it was hadn't wandered. They had moved with confidence, circling my house in the middle of the night, checking windows, testing locks, searching for a way inside. My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep myself upright. If I had shoveled the driveway like Daniel had pushed me to, like he had nearly pleaded, these tracks would be gone, buried under my own footprints, scraped away by the shovel. I would have erased every trace. I never would have known someone had been there. The kettle suddenly screamed, the sound slicing through the quiet. I flinched like I'd been shot and rushed to shut it off, my hands shaking violently. Who was it? Why had they come? And how in God's name, had that old woman known this would happen? My thoughts raced back to Daniel's visit, his fixation on the driveway, the way he'd asked if I'd be alone, if anyone would be checking on me, the raw urgency in his voice when he'd said, "Promise me." The tracks told the truth. Someone had been here. Someone had circled my home like a predator sizing up its prey. And my son had wanted me to wipe away the evidence before I ever laid eyes on it. I forced myself to breathe slowly. The footprints were fresh. The snow hadn't fallen again since the storm ended around midnight. Whoever had made them came after that, deep in the night, in complete darkness. While I slept, I looked again at the scuff marks beneath my bedroom window. They had tried to get in. If that window hadn't been locked. My hand slipped into the pocket of my bathrobe and wrapped around my phone. Lieutenant Marcus Reed had patrolled this neighborhood for over 20 years. He checked in on me after a leaner passed, stopping by during those first difficult months. A good man, steady, someone you could trust. I pulled up his number. My thumb hovered over the screen. This wasn't a prank. Those weren't kids' footprints. This was something else, something that twisted my gut with a fear I hadn't felt in decades. The old woman's face flashed through my mind, those sharp, knowing eyes. She had seen this coming. Somehow, impossibly, she had known. And she had saved my life. I pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. "Reed," came the familiar voice. "Lieutenant, it's Samuel Hart," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I need you to come over. Someone was in my yard last night. I think they were trying to get inside." He arrived within 20 minutes. His cruiser rolled into the driveway without lights, the engine humming quietly. He stepped out, a tall man in his early 50s, solid, calm, the kind of presence that made you feel safer just standing near him. "Mr. Hart," he said, gripping my hand firmly, "show me." I led him toward the back window. He studied the yard for a long moment, then stepped outside. I watched from the window as he crouched beside the footprints, photographing them carefully. He moved with precision, tracing the intruder's path from the side gate to the house, slowly circling the perimeter and stopping at each window. When he came back inside, his face had hardened. "Size 13 boots," he said. "Deep tread. This man weighs at least 200 pounds. He looked at me directly. "Mr. Hart, this wasn't random. Whoever this was knew exactly what they were doing." "Checking for what?" I asked. "To see which entry points were weak." He pulled out a small notepad. "You lock your windows at night." "Always," I replied, "ever since my wife passed." He nodded. "That likely saved you." He jotted something down, then looked up. "Your neighbor across the street, Mrs. Henderson, she has a security camera, doesn't she?" "Margaret," I said. "Yes, she does." "Let's talk to her." Mrs. Margaret Henderson answered the door wearing a quilted robe, her eyes widening the moment she saw us. "Samuel, what on earth is going on?" "Sorry to bother you so early," I said. "We need to look at your camera footage from last night." "Of course, come in." Lieutenant Reed took the remote and began rewinding through the recording. "Try around midnight," I suggested. He fast-forwarded through hours of empty street and drifting snow. Then suddenly, he stopped the footage. "Here," he said, 11:44 p.m. A dark sedan crept down Willow Lane, its headlights off. It slowed and stopped directly in front of my house. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and a knit cap. He glanced up and down the street, then walked straight to my gate. "He knows exactly where he's going," Reed muttered. The man vanished into my yard. The minutes ticked by on the screen, 8, 10, 12. Then the figure reappeared, walking back toward the car with the same calm, unhurried confidence. He got in and drove away. "Back it up," Reed said, "to when he gets in." Margaret rewound the footage. Reed leaned closer. "Can you zoom in?" The image broke into pixels, but part of the license plate became visible. "VT something, 27 maybe," Reed said. "Vermont plates." I squinted. "There's something on the door." There was a logo or lettering along the side of the car, too blurry to make out. "Could be a commercial vehicle," Reed said, snapping photos of the screen with his phone. "Mrs. Henderson, could you email this footage to me?" Her voice trembled. "Is Samuel in danger?" "We're going to make sure he isn't," Reed said calmly. Back at my house, he spread his notes out on the kitchen counter. "Has anyone been around your home recently?" he asked. "Anyone out of the ordinary?" A familiar face flashed into my mind. Daniel's urgent voice. His fixation on the driveway. The way he'd asked who would be checking on me. "My son stopped by last night," I said slowly. "First time in months." Lieutenant Reed's pen stopped mid-sentence. "And he wanted you to shovel the driveway?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "He kept pushing it, got irritated when I told him I'd wait." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. "You think he was going to rob you?" I asked quietly. I looked back out at the yard, at the massive footprints, at the scuffed snow beneath my bedroom window where someone had tested the lock. "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted. Reed's radio crackled. He stepped a few feet away, speaking in low, clipped tones, then returned. "I'm running the partial plate and that logo through the system," he said. "In the meantime, I'm assigning a patrol car to drive by every hour tonight. Lock all your doors, every one of them, and don't open up for anyone you don't recognize." "You think he'll come back?" Reed glanced at the frozen image on the screen. The dark figure, the careful movements, the calm precision. "Men like this don't walk away after one look," he said quietly. "We need to figure out who he is, and fast, before he returns." By noon, my phone rang. Reed didn't waste time with pleasantries. "His name is Victor Hale," he said. "That's who we're dealing with. I ran the partial plate and the vehicle markings through the system. I lowered myself into a chair at the kitchen table, my legs suddenly weak. What kind of man is he? Long record, Reed replied. Assault, battery, organized violence. 2 separate prison terms, one in New York, one here. He got out about 18 months ago. His voice hardened. Mr. Hart, this man isn't a burglar. My stomach dropped. Then what is he? He's the kind of person you hire when you want a problem taken care of. The room seemed to tilt. Taken care of, I whispered. You mean? I mean he doesn't work alone, Reed said. Someone sent him to your house. Someone paid him. My grip tightened around the phone. For what? That's what we're trying to determine. Then his tone changed, lower, heavier. Samuel, I don't usually use your first name, but you need to understand this. I listened, barely breathing. Men like Hale don't scout houses for theft. They're paid to do things most people wouldn't even think about. Like what? I asked. There was a pause on the line. Things I don't want to say out loud until we have him in custody. My mouth went dry. Samuel, Lieutenant Reed said, his voice tight. We located the motel where he's staying, Cedar Ridge Inn off Route 7. My chest tightened. He checked in 3 days ago under an alias, Reed continued. Paid cash, but the desk clerk positively identified him from the photo. He's driving a rental, the same dark sedan from the footage. 3 days ago. Right before Daniel's visit. Right before the old woman warned me about the snow. What does this man want with me? I asked quietly. I don't know yet, Reed said, but we're not waiting around to find out. I heard papers shifting on his end of the line. We've got units positioned near the motel. We're tracking his movements. The rental company confirmed he still has the vehicle. He paused. And Samuel, his phone records show he made a call last night at 11:30 p.m. right before he came to your house. My stomach dropped. Who did he call? A number registered in Huston Falls. We're still tracing it, but someone gave him instructions. Someone gave him your address. The footprints flashed through my mind again. The deliberate path, the careful inspection of each window, the scuff marks beneath my bedroom frame where he'd tested the lock. He's coming back, I said softly. Last night was just checking things out. That's our assessment, Reed replied. His voice hardened. Which is why I need you to listen very carefully. I didn't speak. Stay inside. Lock every door and every window. I'm posting Officer Nolan outside your house for the rest of today and through the night. If Victor Hale comes anywhere near Willow Lane, we'll have him. You think he'll come back tonight? I think he was paid to do a job, Reed said, and he didn't finish it. A beat of silence. So yes. Then more quietly, Samuel, is there anyone who might want to hurt you? Any disputes, money issues, anything at all? Daniel's face rose in my mind again. His urgency. His fixation on the driveway. Promise me you'll shovel tonight. The way he'd asked if I'd be alone. I can't think of anyone, I said, though the words tasted wrong the moment they left my mouth. Think harder, Reed said, because someone hired Victor Hale, someone who knows where you live, someone who wanted him there last night. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. Victor Hale. A man you hired when you wanted problems erased. And someone had aimed him at me. The old woman's warning echoed in my thoughts, colliding with Daniel's strange behavior, with those massive footprints carved into the snow. The pieces were there, scattered, sharp-edged, forming a picture I didn't want to see. My phone lay on the table in front of me. I could call Daniel. I could ask him directly. But ask him what? The questions taking shape in my mind were too dark to say out loud. The thought itself felt impossible. He was my son. My boy. But I had seen the footprints. I had watched the footage. And I had heard Lieutenant Reed's voice when he said, "Someone you hire when you want a problem taken care of." A cold weight settled in my chest, heavy and unmoving. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a coincidence. Someone wanted something from me, something final. And somewhere deep in my mind, in a place I didn't want to turn toward, I was beginning to understand who. They caught him at 4 in the afternoon, just 2 hours before he planned to return to my house. Reed called with the update. "We've got him, Samuel. Victor Hale was taken into custody at the Cedar Ridge Inn without incident." I gripped the phone tighter. "He had a duffel bag packed," Reed continued. "Gloves, lockpicks, a knife." My knees nearly buckled. This wasn't a casual visit he was planning. I swallowed hard. Did he say anything? "He's talking," Reed said. "Detective Lauren Pierce is with him now. I'll call you back." The waiting was unbearable. I paced my kitchen, glancing out the window again and again at Officer Nolan sitting in his cruiser at the curb. Outside, the sun dipped low, washing the snow in shades of orange and gold, peaceful and deceptive. An hour later, my phone rang. "Samuel," Reed said, "I need you to come down to the station. Detective Pierce wants to speak with you." "What did Hale tell you?" "It's better you hear it in person." The police station was a squat brick building on Main Street. Detective Lauren Pierce met me in the lobby, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-30s, dark hair pulled back tightly, her expression calm but serious. "Mr. Hart, thank you for coming," she said. She led me into a small conference room and closed the door. "I need to tell you what Victor Hale told us." I sat down. My hands were trembling. "Hale has agreed to cooperate," she said. "He's being very forthcoming." She opened a folder. "He says he was hired about a week ago to handle a situation." Those were his exact words. "Handle," I repeated dully. "He was paid $5,000 in cash up front," Pierce continued. "His instructions were specific. Make it look like an accident or a burglary gone wrong." My chest tightened. The target needed to be alone, and the house needed to look undisturbed from the outside. The room seemed to tilt. "The driveway," I whispered, "the snow." "Exactly," Pierce said. "If you'd shoveled, his footprints would have blended in. It would have looked like you'd been outside working. Maybe slipped, maybe had an accident." Her gaze didn't waver. "He came the first night to scout, to learn your routine, to see which window would be easiest." "He was supposed to come back last night," I said quietly, "but I didn't shovel." "Yes," she replied. "That's why his tracks were so clear, and why we got involved when we did." She slid more papers onto the table. "Mr. Hart, we've been reviewing Hale's phone records, text messages, financial transfers." My stomach clenched as she turned the page. "It wasn't just cash," Detective Pierce said quietly. "There was also an electronic transfer, 2 days ago, $5,000. My mouth went dry. "From who?" She studied me for a long moment before answering. Then she slid another page forward. "We also recovered text messages," she said. "Messages sent directly to Hale." She read them aloud. "Make sure he's alone. Get it done this week. The old man won't suspect anything." "The old man," I whispered, "that's me." My voice cracked. "Who sent those messages?" Pierce's expression changed, softened. Something like pity crossed her face. "Mr. Hart," she said gently, "I think you should sit down for this." "I am sitting." She hesitated, glancing down at the paperwork, then back up at me. "The person who hired Victor Hale," she said slowly, "is someone you know very well." My heart seemed to stop. The room closed in around me, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. "Who?" I asked. She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped, looked back at the documents, then at me again. "Come back tomorrow morning," she said. 9 a.m. We'll go through everything together, the bank records, the text messages, all of it. Her voice was careful, controlled. "But for tonight, I want you to go home, try to rest, process this, because tomorrow is going to be very hard." "Please," I whispered, "just tell me now, who is it?" Her eyes filled with that same awful sympathy. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "I promise. For tonight, go home. Officer Nolan will remain outside your house. You're safe." Safe? The word felt hollow. I walked out of the station in a daze, drove home without really seeing the road, sat alone in my dark kitchen, staring at nothing. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew. I'd known when Lieutenant Reed asked if anyone had been around recently. I'd known when I remembered Daniel's urgency, his fixation on the driveway. "Promise me you'll shovel tonight." Knowing something and accepting it are two very different things. My son. My boy. My phone lay on the table in front of me. I could have called him, demanded answers, but I was afraid of what I might hear in his voice. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, running through every person I'd ever known, asking myself who could possibly want me gone. But deep down, I already had the answer. I just couldn't bring myself to believe it. The next morning, I sat in a small conference room at the station. Detective Pierce placed a single document in front of me. A bank transfer receipt. $5,000. Sender Daniel Hart. My son. The room tilted. I stared at the words until they blurred into nothing. "Mr. Hart," Pierce said, her voice distant, "I know this is devastating." "There has to be a mistake," I said. My voice sounded empty, unreal. He couldn't. I looked down at the paper again, my hands shaking. And somewhere inside me, something finally began to break. "There's more," Detective Pierce said quietly. She spread several pages across the table, laying them out like cards in a hand no one should ever have to see. Text messages. Messages exchanged between Daniel's phone and Victor Hale's burner. "Make sure the old man is alone. Get it done this week." Then she tapped another message. "This one was sent the morning before Hale came to your house." I read the words, my vision blurring. "He'll be home alone tonight." I couldn't breathe. Each message felt like a blade, twisting deeper with every line. "Phone records show 3 calls between them," Pierce continued. "The last one was at 7:15 p.m. I looked up slowly. "That was right after Daniel left your house," she said. "Right after he insisted you shovel the driveway. Right after he asked if you'd be alone." "Why?" The word came out broken, barely more than air. Pierce pulled out another document. "Your son owes approximately $180,000, she said. "Gambling debt, online poker, sports betting. He's been in deep for nearly 2 years. $180,000, I repeated numbly. How had I not seen it? "He's been receiving threats," she went on. "Messages from loan sharks, pay up or else. We know where you live." Her voice stayed calm, steady, professional, but every word crushed me. "Your home is valued at around $600,000, she said. "As your only child, Daniel stands to inherit everything." She let that sink in. It would have solved all of his problems. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. My home. My life. Reduced to a calculation. When Alina died, I heard myself say, my voice distant, Daniel was 8 years old, just a child. Pierce listened silently. "He was terrified," I continued, "of being alone, of losing me too." The memory rose unbidden, clear and painful. A small boy with tear-streaked cheeks, arms locked tightly around my waist, his voice shaking. "I'll always take care of you, Dad, always." Somewhere between that frightened child and the man who had stood in my kitchen, something had shattered. I gave him everything, I whispered. After a leaner passed, he was all I had left. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, I said. Helped with his apartment, his car. Every time he needed money, I gave it to him. My voice cracked. I would have given him the house if he'd asked, every bit of it. All he had to do was ask. Pierce didn't speak. There was nothing she could say. He didn't just want the house, I said slowly, the truth finally taking shape. He wanted me gone. I swallowed hard. Not sent away, not put into a home. Gone. Not living somewhere else, I said quietly. Gone. Detective Pierce nodded once. I'm sorry, I asked. Where is he? We have units on the way to his apartment now, she replied. He'll be in custody within the hour. She hesitated. Do you want to be here when we bring him in? You don't have to be. I thought about that. About never seeing Daniel's face again. About letting him fade into just another stranger in the world. But I needed answers. I needed to look into his eyes, needed to see what was there when he realized I was still alive. I want to see him, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. When you bring him in, I need to see his face. Pierce studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. We'll call you. I stood to leave, my legs unsteady. At the door, I stopped and turned back. That woman at the grocery store, I said. She knew. Somehow she knew what he was planning. Pierce tilted her head slightly. Sometimes people see things the rest of us miss, she said. Or sometimes they see exactly what's there. I swallowed hard. And I realized how blind I'd been. Blind to the fact that my own son was capable of this. The boy who once promised he'd always take care of me had hired someone to make sure I'd never need taking care of again. They arrested Daniel that evening at Mapleton International Airport. He was attempting to board a flight to Mexico. Lieutenant Reed called me at 6 o'clock. We have him, Samuel. He's being brought in now. If you want to be here, I'm on my way. I reached the station 20 minutes later. Pierce met me in the hallway, her expression carefully neutral. He's in interrogation room 2, she said. There's an observation room next door, one-way glass. He won't know you're there unless you want him to. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She led me into a small, darkened room. Through the glass, I saw Daniel sitting at a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked smaller, younger somehow. His hair was unkempt, his eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like my son. Pierce entered the interrogation room with another officer. Daniel's head snapped up immediately. This is insane, he said, his voice sharp. I don't know what you think I did, but… Daniel Hart, Pierce interrupted calmly. You are being charged with conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation of murder. Her voice was flat, professional. We have bank records showing a $5,000 transfer from your account to Victor Hale. We have text messages exchanged between your phone and his. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And behind the glass, unseen, I watched my son realize that the life he'd tried to erase was still very much alive. We have phone records, Detective Pierce said calmly. I didn't. Daniel's face drained of color. This is insane. I would never. Pierce placed the documents on the table one by one. The bank transfer, the messages, the call logs. I watched my son's expression collapse as the reality settled in. Watched him understand there was no way out of this. I didn't have a choice, he blurted out suddenly. They were going to hurt me. You don't understand these people, what they're capable of. So, Pierce said evenly, you hired someone to hurt your father instead. The house is just sitting there, Daniel shot back, desperation creeping into his voice. He's old. He doesn't need all that money. I'm his son. I'm supposed to inherit it anyway. My hands clenched into tight fists. I just needed it now, he went on, and he wouldn't have understood. Wouldn't have understood. As if I were the problem. As if my life were an inconvenience. So you paid Victor Hale to make it look like an accident, Pierce said quietly. Daniel's shoulders slumped. I told him it had to look natural, he murmured. A fall, a break-in, something. His voice cracked. I didn't want him to suffer. How considerate, Pierce said flatly. Then she leaned forward. Daniel, your father is here. He's watching. Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes darted around the room, finally landing on the mirrored glass. On me. Dad, he whispered. His voice broke. Dad, please, I'm sorry, I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. Those people were going to. I couldn't listen anymore. I couldn't watch him justify it. Couldn't hear him reduce my life to a problem that needed fixing. I turned away from the glass and stepped toward the door. Lieutenant Reed was standing there. Do you want to speak with him? He asked quietly. I looked back one last time, at the son I had raised, the boy I had loved, the man who had hired someone to end me. No, I said softly, I don't have a son. I walked out of the station into the cold December evening. The snow had finally stopped falling. The sky was clear, stars just beginning to show. The air was sharp and clean in my lungs. For the first time in days, I could breathe. Behind me, I heard Daniel shouting my name, begging, pleading. I didn't turn around. Spring arrived early that year, washing away the last remains of winter. By March, the snow had vanished, replaced by green shoots breaking through the thawed ground. The trial moved quickly. Daniel pleaded guilty. 25 years, with the possibility of parole after 15. Victor Hale received 30 years, no parole. I didn't attend the sentencing. Detective Pierce called to tell me the outcome. I thanked her, then ended the call. I sold the house in April. I couldn't stay there, not after everything. I bought a small one-bedroom condo near downtown Mapleton, overlooking Silver Lake Bay. Simple, quiet, enough space to begin again. The neighbors from my old street checked in from time to time. The Millers called once a week. Margaret Henderson rang every Sunday without fail. But it was a flyer at Harper's Market that changed things. A notice for a community group at the senior center. I showed up one Tuesday. That's where I met Walter, Henry, Eugene, and Leon. We started playing chess on Thursdays, went to a hockey game together. Mostly, we just existed in the same space. No questions, no pity, just companionship. I signed up for a painting class taught by Elaine. Learned quickly that I was terrible at landscapes, but surprisingly decent with portraits. At the library, Diane offered me volunteer work 3 mornings a week. Quiet, orderly work, the kind that lets your mind rest. One morning in May, I found myself back at Harper's. Emily was still behind the register. Mr. Hart, she said with a smile, haven't seen you in a while. I moved downtown, I replied. I hesitated, then asked, Emily, that elderly woman last December, the one I helped pay for, have you seen her since? Her smile slowly faded. That's the strange thing, she said. I've worked here 6 years, I never saw her before that day, and I've never seen her since, not once. Never before. Never after. As if she'd appeared only for that moment, then vanished. I stood there thinking about her clear, knowing eyes. Your life depends on it. Thank you, Emily, I said. That evening I sat on my balcony, watching the sun sink into the water. A pair of geese flew overhead, calling out as they headed north. I thought about that old woman. She had seen something that day, a future that terrified her enough to speak. She changed it, saved my life with 6 simple words about snow. I would never know who she truly was. Maybe just a confused woman who made a lucky guess. Maybe something else entirely. It didn't matter. What mattered was this. I was here, breathing, watching the sunset, making friends, building a life that belonged to me. And I finally understood something I'd learned too late. Family isn't just who you're born to. It was the people who chose to stay. The ones who brought casseroles, who played chess on Thursdays, who taught me to paint. The Millers, Margaret Henderson, Walter, Henry, Eugene, Leon, Elaine, Diane. These were my family now. I raised my coffee cup to the empty air. Whoever you were, I whispered, thank you. You saved more than my life. You gave me a chance to live it. The breeze carried my words over the water, and somewhere I like to believe, an old woman with knowing eyes smiled. It's never too late to begin again, to find your people, to choose kindness over blood. Life offers second chances in the strangest ways, sometimes through a warning about snow. I was 70 years old, and I was just beginning to understand what it meant to truly live. Looking back, I see the signs I missed, the distance, the desperation. Don't be like me. Don't let love blind you to danger, even from family. God sent help when I needed it most. That mysterious woman at Harper's Market, I believe she was his messenger. God sees what we cannot, knows what we refuse to believe. Sometimes God works through strangers to save us from our own blood. The lesson: trust is earned, not owed. Family isn't DNA. It's presence, loyalty, and love in action. I spent 70 years believing blood meant everything, only to discover my real family was waiting in a chess game, a painting class, a volunteer shift. These stories, grandpa stories, aren't just entertainment. They're warnings, lessons, reminders that evil can wear a familiar face, that salvation comes unexpectedly, and that it's never too late to start over. This is one of many grandpa stories I'll share. Stories of survival, redemption, and second chances. If an old man like me can rebuild at 70, anyone can. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs this message about trust, family, and new beginnings. Your support means everything. And for me now, it's simply enough to breathe, to watch the sunset, to live.